Sometimes, the ordinary moments of our daily lives take a terrifying turn. Whether it's waiting for a bus, walking through a park, or simply enjoying the quiet of the night, the unexpected can strike when we least expect it. Tonight, I'll be sharing chilling encounters that happened in seemingly normal settings, but left those involved questioning what they saw, heard, and felt. Get ready for stories that will make you think twice about what might be lurking in the shadows. My name is Liam. I've always been the kind of person who enjoys the quiet of late nights. There's something peaceful about being alone with your thoughts, especially in a world that's constantly loud and fast-paced. But one night, at a lonely bus stop on the outskirts of town, that solitude turned into something I'll never forget. It was a chilly autumn evening, and I had missed the earlier bus by mere minutes. The next one wasn't due for another half hour. The stop was near a park, a vast, sprawling area with towering trees and winding trails. At night, the place transformed into a shadowy expanse where even the bravest souls might hesitate to wander. The street was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of distant cars or footsteps replaced by the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. A single street lamp flickered above the bus stop, casting weak, wavering light that barely illuminated the area. I sat on the cold metal bench, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. A soft crunching sound pulled my attention away. I looked up, expecting to see someone walking along the path from the park. But the pathway was empty. I told myself it was probably just the wind rustling the fallen leaves, but something about the sound felt off, like deliberate, slow footsteps. I shrugged it off and went back to my phone, but after a few minutes, I noticed it again. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. This time, it was closer. I stared into the park, squinting against the dim light, but I couldn't see anything. Just darkness and the faint outline of trees. My heart started to race, but I stayed put, trying to act as if nothing was wrong. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. At first, it was subtle, like a shadow shifting against the trees. But as I focused, I realized there was someone, or something, standing just beyond the reach of the street lamp's glow. It was tall, unnaturally so, and its figure seemed to blend with the darkness around it. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking slightly. No response. The figure didn't move, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me. My hands tightened around my phone, and I stood up, trying to appear confident. "Do you need something?" I asked, louder this time. Still nothing. I debated whether to stay at the stop or start walking. The next bus wasn't due for another 20 minutes, and I wasn't sure I wanted to wait that long with whatever that was lurking nearby. As I took a step toward the street, the figure moved. Not closer, but sideways, gliding effortlessly behind the trees as if it were circling me. I could hear the faint crunch of leaves beneath its feet, but the movement didn't match the sound. It was too smooth, too fluid, like it wasn't bound by the same rules as the rest of us. My breath quickened as I backed away, keeping my eyes on the park. Suddenly, the street lamp above me buzzed and flickered, plunging the area into darkness for a split second. When the light came back, the figure was gone. I turned and started walking quickly down the road, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the empty street, but soon, I realized I wasn't alone. Behind me, I could hear the faint crunch of leaves again, matching my pace. I glanced over my shoulder, and my blood ran cold. The figure was there, following me, its movements unnervingly smooth and deliberate. It stayed just outside the glow of the street lamps, as if it thrived in the shadows. I broke into a run, my breath coming in short gasps as I raced toward the nearest convenience store a few blocks away. The sound of crunching leaves followed me the entire way, never speeding up, never slowing down, just keeping pace. When I finally burst through the doors of the store, the clerk looked up in surprise. I glanced back through the glass, but the street was empty. I spent the rest of the night in that store, waiting until the first bus of the morning arrived. I haven't been back to that bus stop since. Whatever was out there that night, it wasn't just a person. And I'll never forget the way it moved, like it didn't belong in our world. Story 2. My name is Francisco. The bus stop near my apartment is nothing special, just a bench and a small shelter with a cracked roof, sitting on the edge of a quiet road. Behind it is a narrow alley lined with old brick buildings, and in front, the street stretches under dim, flickering lamps. I usually avoid being out late, but that night, I had no choice. It was past midnight, and I was alone at the stop. The bus was supposed to arrive in 10 minutes, but I knew from experience it could take much longer. The night was unusually cold, and the air felt damp, as if it was about to rain. The only sound was the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. I pulled out my phone, trying to distract myself. But almost immediately, I felt something odd, like the atmosphere had shifted. It's hard to describe, but the air seemed heavier, thicker somehow. I looked up from my phone and glanced around. The street was empty, and the alley behind me was dark. Then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like footsteps. I turned toward the sound, expecting to see someone walking up the street. But there was no one there. The tapping stopped for a moment, then started again, closer this time. It didn't sound like normal footsteps. It was uneven, almost dragging, as if whoever, or whatever, was making the sound was limping. I stood up from the bench, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But as I looked around, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The shadows on the street weren't right. Under the flickering light of the street lamp, the shadows of the trees and the bench stretched in the wrong direction, like the light source had shifted. But the lamp above me wasn't moving. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow that didn't belong to anything. It was tall and thin, and it stretched across the ground as if cast by something standing behind me. My breath caught in my throat. I slowly turned around, but there was nothing there. The tapping started again, now echoing louder, and I realized it was coming from the alley behind the bus stop. I froze, straining my ears to pick up any other sound. But the tapping was all I could hear, closer, louder, until it was right at the edge of the alley. I backed up, my eyes glued to the dark opening of the alley. The tapping stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence. Then, a faint whisper broke the stillness. It was low, guttural, and unintelligible, but it sent chills racing down my spine. That was enough for me. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it toward the alley. The light barely penetrated the darkness, but for a split second, I thought I saw movement, something shifting just out of sight. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I started walking quickly down the street, away from the stop, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. When I was about a block away, I heard a loud crash, like something heavy falling onto the bench I had just been sitting on. I ran the rest of the way home, not caring about the bus anymore. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door and collapsed onto the couch, trying to catch my breath. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a moment, I thought it was a notification about the bus schedule. But when I looked, the screen was blank. The buzz came again, even though there was no message, no call, nothing. That's when I noticed my reflection in the dark screen. Over my shoulder, there was a faint shadow, tall and thin. I dropped the phone and turned on every light in my apartment. I didn't sleep that night. And to this day, I avoid that bus stop, no matter how late I get home. Story 3. My name is Adam. I live in a quiet neighborhood, where the streets feel deserted after sunset. The bus stop I use daily sits under a single flickering streetlight, next to an overgrown park that's eerily silent at night. It's not the kind of place you want to hang around for long, but it's the only bus stop that gets me home after my late shifts. One night, I finished work later than usual. By the time I got to the stop, the streets were empty, and the air felt unnaturally cold for that time of year. The street light was flickering more than usual, casting brief, uneven shadows that seemed to dance along the sidewalk. I pulled out my phone to check the bus schedule, 15 minutes until the next one. I leaned against the bench, scrolling through my phone, when I got that feeling. You know, the one where you just know someone is watching you. I looked up, but there was no one. Just the dark park across the street and the empty road stretching in both directions. Trying to shake it off, I went back to my phone. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It felt heavier, like eyes boring into me. This time, I scanned the park more closely. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow from the trees, but then I noticed it was too still, too defined. A figure stood just inside the tree line, where the park met the street. It was tall, its silhouette barely visible against the darkness. My first instinct was to think it was someone waiting for the bus too, but something about it felt wrong. I couldn't make out any details, no face, no clothes, nothing. Just a shape. I tried to focus on my phone, but I couldn't ignore it. Every few seconds, I glanced back, hoping it was gone. It wasn't. Instead, it moved closer. It didn't walk, though. It just seemed to shift positions, almost like it was glitching forward. 1 second it was under the trees, the next, it was at the edge of the park. The streetlight flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a face, pale, hollow eyes staring straight at me. My breath caught, and I felt paralyzed. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the streetlight went out completely, plunging the area into darkness. I heard a noise, a faint scraping sound, like something dragging along the pavement. It was coming from the direction of the figure. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else, but I forced myself to move. I backed up, clutching my phone, ready to sprint. The street light buzzed back on, and the figure was gone. But the scraping sound hadn't stopped. It was louder now, coming from right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just the empty street and the distant hum of the city. The bus pulled up at that moment, its headlights washing over the stop. Without hesitation, I jumped on. As the bus pulled away, I glanced back at the park. The figure was standing in the same spot again, watching me leave. I never used that bus stop again. To this day, I don't know what I saw, but I still get chills whenever I pass by that park. Thank you for joining me as we explored these unsettling experiences. It's a reminder that sometimes, the scariest things aren't far-off places or the supernatural, they're the moments that creep into our everyday lives. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe for more chilling tales. Stay safe, and until next time, keep your eyes open, you never know what's out there.